special and dangerous performance at St. John Cathedral. At 6 o'clock, famous man on the wire, Philippe Petit will once again defy gravity.
Installed in St. John the Divine is a new feature, a tightrope suspended 20 feet in the air. It's surrounded by over 1,000 multicoloured ribbons inscribed by prayers.
Immediately I got the idea that if the wire was crossing the nave high enough for me to pass through the ribbons instead of underneath, then I could, like a boat on a lake, I could create a wake where the ribbon responds to my passage.
That's Philippe Petit. He's best known for illegally walking the wire between the Twin Towers 50 years ago. He's an artist in residence at the cathedral, and his performance tonight, the first at the cathedral in a decade, is sold out. It's required thorough technical and mental preparation.
I practice on the floor, I time myself. It's like an actor preparing for a Broadway show.
This evening marks a very special and dangerous performance at St. John Cathedral. At 6 o'clock, famous man on the wire, Philippe Petit will once again defy gravity.
Installed in St. John the Divine is a new feature, a tightrope suspended 20 feet in the air. It's surrounded by over 1,000 multicoloured ribbons inscribed by prayers.
Immediately I got the idea that if the wire was crossing the nave high enough for me to pass through the ribbons instead of underneath, then I could, like a boat on a lake, I could create a wake where the ribbon responds to my passage.
That's Philippe Petit. He's best known for illegally walking the wire between the Twin Towers 50 years ago. He's an artist in residence at the cathedral, and his performance tonight, the first at the cathedral in a decade, is sold out. It's required thorough technical and mental preparation.
I practice on the floor, I time myself. It's like an actor preparing for a Broadway show.
But 20 feet in the air, Petit knows there's much more at stake.
I really have looked at all the aspects technically and then artistically, and there is nothing left to chance. And that's what allows me to do what I call a beautiful walk, because I'm not thinking, oh my God, I hope the wire is strong enough.
Petit is often mistaken for a circus performer, but he considers himself an artist.
I was not born in the circus. My parents hated what I wanted to do. I had to fight, them and all that. I learned by myself and under the influence of arts.
People nonetheless recognize Petit for his long career of daring walks.
And you wonder why, and I was not afraid of. So all those things are quite beautiful, but it's not my aim to inspire people.
Still, Laura Bosley is hoping his performance will do exactly that. She plans events for the cathedral.
We love when he walks here, because there's something about these soaring ceilings we have here, and having somebody being up there and walking when we are here down on the ground. There's something, it's actually very spiritual, I think, just sort of that connection.
But there are worldly considerations too. Tickets for tonight's show can be as high as Petit's work, up to $1,000.
Nothing is free. So every time, even art costs money to make art. But we know that the return is going to be wonderful when it's fully.
You may be nervous about tonight's performance, but Petite certainly isn't. Maureen Saint, Columbia Radio News.
And now, some sounds of the city from across the 5 boroughs.
I like writing. I think it's always just been a part of who I am as a person.
Olivia Williams, student writer in the Bronx.
One of the things I'm doing now is I'm incorporating a typewriter because typewriters make you give up perfection. I'm a very crafty person, so if I'm not writing, I'm probably like crafting something. Like I like building Legos. That's a really good pastime for me. It's very sentimental, something I used to do with my grandmother. I think crafting is about the process, which I think is right. That's writing. Writing is about the process, how you get to an end result. And so I'm spending these past 2 years writing something only to have like 180 pages at the end of it. But I enjoyed the journey there.
You're listening to Uptown Radio, Thursdays at 4.
New York City politicians continue to struggle with making housing more affordable. Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine held a rally earlier today discussing his plans for a solution. Dean Condileo reports from City Hall.
Over half of New Yorkers spend more than a third of their income on rent. Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine says affordable housing is urgently needed.
We are here in the midst of the worst housing affordability crisis this city has ever faced.
Levine went on to say when an affordable apartment does become available, the city gets up to 1,000 applicants. Standing before City Hall this morning, Levine announced a new plan that he says will create more reasonably priced apartments.
It would tell developers, if you're going to build in a dense residential area, we're going to let you build some more, 20%, as long as every square inch of that additional density is used for affordable housing and only affordable housing.
Levine's proposal seeks to create over 10,000 affordable housing units citywide. Councilmember Keith Powers, who represents Midtown, says his team has been trying to figure out what affordable would mean.
We took the number 2,500, which used to feel like a reasonable amount to pay for a one-bedroom. There's only 6 in my district that you can pay that. And I think I'm surprised there's 6, to be honest. And they are not one-bedrooms, my friends. They are closets.
Councilmember Eric Botcher represents the west side of Manhattan below Times Square. He says New York is just overstuffed with people.
We had, between 2010 and 2020, a net population gain of over 630,000. That's the population of Detroit coming to New York over 10 years. We only added just over 200,000 units of housing.
Researchers predict this level of growth will continue. In the words of Botcher, adding another Detroit. State Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel says the future of New York depends on solving this crisis.
We know on the west side of Manhattan that it's harder to find young people who can afford to live in our district. But it's also important to our economy, because if New York City can no longer attract young people, we will no longer lead the nation in so many industries. So,
Brendan Cheney is the Director of Policy and Operations at New York Housing Conference. He says this is more than solving a problem for any one type of New Yorker.
For young people joining the workforce who are priced out, it's for families with too few options, and it's for older New Yorkers that want to stay and live in New York.
It's up to lawmakers in Albany to move this plan further. Dean Condileo, Columbia Radio News.
This month, New York City's MTA officials are beginning a new program to combat fare evasion. The program includes the installation of new emergency exits at select stations in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Queens. The stations were selected because they have a higher number of turnstiles, which means the program should not interfere with foot traffic. Danny Pierlstein from Rider Alliance, an organization fighting for a more fair and sustainable transit system, spoke with me about what this pilot program means for New Yorkers. Perlstein said that the MTA created a panel hoping to combat fare evasion. Here's what he had to say about this particular pilot program.
So the Fairness Panel reported, it was either last year or the year before, after a couple of years of work, recommending an expansion of the Fair Fares program, recommending new fare gates. But as far as we know from a pretty thorough review, they didn't recommend, making it harder to leave the system in order to discourage people from opening the gate where people come through.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this new pilot program and about the MTA's hopes for it?
There are a lot of different ways of improving fare collection that they're exploring, and this one seems sort of punitive and reactionary. Locking the gates or having a delay lock on the gates, will make it much harder for people who use the gates routinely, who can't use turnstiles, people with wheelchairs, people with strollers, people with suitcases. The fact that the gate won't open immediately, which people expect it to, could cause a panic and, could result in endangering riders. So there's that concern as well.
Right. And you mentioned that there were other potential solutions that the MTA that were considered.
Well, they recognize there's no one solution. And in general, we encourage experimentation, right? In some ways, the MTA, shies away from it just because it's so big that when it does something, it's very hard to undo. Just as we don't want to see, people tackled and handcuffed over fare evasion, as sometimes happens.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to see the system made less safe or less welcoming for riders.
In terms of the work that Riders Alliance does, if these programs continue, what kind of work or response would come from you guys? Or
we've been very focused for a long time on getting outside support for the transit system. And so, with the pandemic, we have moved further in that direction, I think, than we anticipated, which is the system is less fare dependent than before, just because there are fewer riders, largely because of people working from home. But I think we would have to see how it goes. Hopefully this will proceed without incident, but I do think, I don't anticipate this pilot expanding. And I think part of it is, the outcry, justifiably, in particular from the community of people with disabilities who rely on the gates.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
From Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Pascal Hogue. President Biden has issued an executive order targeting Israeli settlers accused of attacking Palestinians in the West Bank. The order imposes an initial round of financial sanctions and visa bans on 4 individuals accused of, quote, undermining peace, security, and stability in the West Bank. Biden officials say more individuals would be sanctioned in the future. The U.S. has approved plans for a series of strikes on Iranian targets in Syria and Iraq. This comes after a drone attack killed 3 U.S. soldiers at a military base in Jordan on Sunday. U.S. officials have blamed an Iranian-backed militia group for the attack, which left 41 other troops injured. Iran has denied any role in the attack. The drone attack on Sunday and the U.S.'s plan to strike back is stoking fears that the war could spread into a wider regional conflict.
This is a clear signal that Ukraine will withstand and that Europe will withstand.
That's the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking to lawmakers in Brussels today. The European Union has approved a deal to fund support for Ukraine in its ongoing war against Russia. The fund is worth 50 billion euros, or about $54 billion. EU lawmakers intend for it to support Ukraine until the end of 2027. The measure comes as additional aid from the U.S. for Ukraine remains stalled in Congress. Ukraine began a counteroffensive against Russia's invasion last June, but has made little progress on the battlefields in recent months. A shock in the world of Formula One today. Legendary driver Lewis Hamilton announced that he will leave Mercedes for longtime rival Ferrari at the end of the 2024 season. Hamilton has spent more than a decade with Mercedes and won 6 of his 7 world championships with the team.
Tienes cara de gay, que inmaduro este güey.
That's TikTok user @Reputation singing Taylor Swift's 2014 hit Shake It Off. You're going to be hearing a lot more of these covers on TikTok soon. That's because today, Universal Music Group removed original recordings from some of its biggest stars, including Swift, The Weeknd, and Olivia Rodrigo, from the platform after the two failed to reach a new licensing deal. But altered versions of these songs, sped up and slowed down versions, as well as covers, which have been a mainstay on the app, will be not affected by the move. Universal says it has raised concerns about artist pay rates and the rise of AI-generated songs in recent negotiations with the platform. TikTok has accused the label of spreading a false narrative. Pascal Hogue, Columbia Radio News.
And now, some sounds of the city from across the 5 boroughs.
What I like about it the most of all is that when you put it on, it's in the front and in the back.
David Kamen, hat enthusiast, Upper West Side.
It's modeled after an Australian rancher's hat. Different colors. I have white, beige, dark beige, darker beige, and black. These sides come down, or they can be, held up. It protects your neck, protects your front. If the sun's in my eyes, I just do this. Also, it looks good. The things that puzzle me most about life is these guys. I see old men. I'm an old man, but I see these guys in their 50s and 60s stumping along in shorts and no hat in freezing weather. How do they do it? It's crazy.
You're listening to Uptown Radio, Thursdays at 4.
Allowing me to reminisce about my hat.
Yeah, of course. Have a good day.
Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Our executive producer today was Dominic Hall Thomas. Leading our staff of reporters was senior producer Julia Leo, joined by assistant producer Clara Bouters. And shaping up the edition was senior editor Claire Davenport, with the help of assistant editor Christina Makaya.
Director Cecilia Blateau coordinated our studio production team. In charge of webcasting and socials was Tommaso Baronio, and working the board was Zoe Yi.
Pascal Hogue and Irina Humeyunuk delivered our local newscasts, and day reporters Maureen Saint, Dean Condaleo, and Samuel Eli Shepard brought you the latest on the ground in New York.
Our instructors Sally Herships and Carrie Donahue advise our staff. And we're your hosts. I'm Fahima Dagia.
And I'm Desiree Nikfarjam. Uptown Radio is live Thursdays at 4, but you can always find us at uptownradio.org. Until next time, and from all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.